I used to think betrayal would come like a thunderclap. Something loud, something furious. A slamming door. A broken vase. A shouting match at midnight. That's how it happens in the movies, right? But when it finally arrived at my doorstep, it came with the soft cry of a newborn and a nurse's confused smile. My name is Mark Turner. I'm 34 years old, a project manager for a construction company based out of a quiet suburb about 45 minutes outside Indianapolis. I've been married to Emily for just over 6 years. We've got 2 boys, Caleb, 4, and Mason, 2, who have enough energy to power a city block and who are, by any measure, the best part of me. Or so I thought. The baby girl, her name is Naomi now, though we didn't pick it, was born on a rainy Thursday in late February. Emily had gone into labor 2 weeks early. I was nervous, pacing the same dull beige floors of St. David's Hospital we'd walked twice before. There was this strange quiet between us that morning, like we were both underwater. I chalked it up to exhaustion. Caleb had had a fever the night before and Mason still wasn't sleeping through the night. But when I saw Naomi, my mind broke clean in half. She was beautiful. She still is. Tiny fingers, soft pink lips, full head of black curls. But her skin was unmistakably deep brown. Her eyes weren't blue like mine, or hazel like Emily's. They were nearly black, wide, alert, blinking up at the fluorescent light above the delivery room. I remember standing there, paralyzed, clutching the hospital flowers I'd picked up in a rush from Kroger. My mouth was dry. I looked at Emily. She looked back. Not in shock. Not in confusion. But in guilt. She didn't even try to pretend. Didn't mutter something about recessive genes. Didn't cry out in disbelief. She didn't even hold the baby right away. "Mark," she whispered. "We need to talk. I'm not proud of what I did next." I walked out. Not far. I just couldn't stay in that room. I paced the hallway for 20 minutes, my brain on fire. Every scenario ran through my head like a crime drama. Was it a switch at the hospital? A genetic mutation? A prank? But I knew the truth. You can feel betrayal before it's spoken. Like the moment before you vomit, your body knows. When I came back in, Emily was holding Naomi. Crying. Not hysterical. Just quiet tears streaking down her cheeks as she looked down at the infant who was both hers and someone else's. "I'm so sorry," she said. And just like that, everything I thought I knew collapsed. We didn't scream at each other. That came later, in private, when the world wasn't watching. In the hospital room, I just asked the questions any man would ask. Who? When? How long? Was it just once? She told me his name was Jordan. They'd met during the lockdown, back in 2020. He worked at the same nonprofit where she volunteered. He was charming, smart, a great listener. Her words, not mine. "It was just a stupid few weeks," she said. "It was during the pandemic, you were working double shifts, we were fighting constantly, and I was lonely." She said it like that was supposed to soften the blow. Like the pandemic had caused her infidelity the way it caused people to bake sourdough and download TikTok. But what gutted me the most was her voice, the quiet regret, not desperation. She wasn't fighting for our marriage. She was just explaining why she'd set it on fire. I wanted to hate her. God, I did. But I also knew our boys were at home, asleep in their beds, waiting for their mom to come back. I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not yet. The DNA tests came a week later. I hadn't wanted them. I already knew the truth. But Emily insisted. She said I deserved clarity. A part of me thinks she was hoping it would turn out worse, that maybe Mason or Caleb weren't mine either. That way, maybe I'd leave outright. Maybe I'd take the burden of decision off her shoulders. But the results came back. 99.999% certainty. Both boys were mine. Naomi wasn't. The next few weeks were a blur. I hired a divorce attorney. She didn't fight it. But because we were already struggling financially and the boys needed stability, we agreed, against the advice of literally everyone, to continue living together. At least for now. We split the house in a weird sort of Cold War arrangement. I slept in the basement, she took the upstairs. We did alternate night shifts with the baby. Dinners were mostly silent. It was hell. But manageable. What wasn't manageable were the comments. It started with neighbors. People I'd known for years. Friends who'd helped us move into the house, attended Mason's birthday parties. They stopped me at the grocery store or outside the mailbox and gave me that look. You know the one. The half-smile, half-pitying grimace. She doesn't look like the boys, one of them said. I didn't know you adopted, another whispered. The worst one came from a woman I used to consider a friend. She lowered her sunglasses, leaned in like she was delivering neighborhood gossip, and said, I guess she got a little bored, huh? Couldn't resist trying something different? Like it was a joke. Like this was a story she could laugh about over brunch. Nobody asked how I was doing. Nobody asked how Caleb was handling it, or if we were okay, or if Emily was in therapy. All they saw was the baby's skin. All they focused on was the race. Not the betrayal. Not the broken family. Not the fact that my sons were about to grow up in a house where their parents barely spoke to each other. And I realized something terrifying. If grown adults couldn't get past the color of Naomi's skin, what hope did my boys have? The first time Caleb asked about Naomi, it was innocent. He was 4, too young to understand timelines, biology, or betrayal. He was sitting at the kitchen table, swinging his legs beneath his dinosaur pajamas, spooning Cheerios into his mouth. Daddy, he said, milk dribbling down his chin, why is Naomi brown? Emily froze. She'd been bottle-feeding Naomi on the couch, half asleep. I just poured coffee. And for a moment, the world slowed down. The ceiling fan made this awful hum, and outside, the sound of a lawnmower buzzed like a warning. My hand tightened around the coffee mug. It was too early for this. But I knelt beside him, wiped his chin with a napkin, and said the only thing I could think of. Because people come in all different colors, buddy. Just like paint. Or jelly beans. Or puppies. Naomi's skin is a beautiful color called brown. Just like chocolate. He grinned. I like chocolate. Me too. That was it. That was the whole conversation. And it hit me like a punch in the throat. Because for him, it wasn't complicated. There was no history there, no betrayal. Just a question, and an answer. I wished I could live in that moment forever, before the world sank its claws into him and tried to twist something pure into something shameful. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the last time the question would come up. I don't hate Naomi. I want to say that clearly, because people have tried to project that onto me. Colleagues, relatives, even Emily herself. You're so cold, she once hissed when I avoided eye contact during a 3 a.m. diaper change. But Naomi is innocent. She didn't ask to be born into the chaos of our lives. She didn't choose her father or her mother or her skin tone. And if anything, I feel a strange, painful tenderness toward her, the way you might feel toward a stranger's child who's been dropped on your doorstep during a storm. What I hate, is what she represents. She is living, breathing proof of my wife's betrayal. Every cry at night, every coo from her bassinet, every lullaby Emily sings to her alone, it's a reminder of what was done to me. And yet, I can't blame her. Sometimes I hold her when Emily's too tired. Sometimes I watch her sleep, curled up like a comma in her crib, and I wonder what kind of life she'll grow into. I worry about the things I never had to worry about with Caleb and Mason. Will people in this town, this very white, very insular suburb, treat her like an outsider? Will my sons? That last question keeps me up at night. We live in a town where diversity is something people put on yard signs but not in practice. We believe in love and equality, reads the lawn sign 2 houses down, the same neighbor who once said to me, well, at least she didn't bring home one of those gang types. I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to. People think racism wears a hood and waves a flag. But in the suburbs, it wears yoga pants and votes blue. It smiles at your face while calculating your worth behind your back. And I see it leaking into everything. Mason's daycare teacher asked me, smiling, always smiling, if Naomi was adopted. When I said no, her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a frown and wasn't quite a smirk. Oh, she said. Well, that's nice of you. What does that even mean? I started therapy 2 weeks after the hospital. I needed it. Badly. My therapist's name is Grant. Mid-50s, gray-bearded, kind eyes, the kind of guy who listens without filling the silence. At first, I hated being there. Talking felt like pulling splinters out with tweezers. She cheated, I said on the first day. That's it. End of story. But he kept pushing. Not into forgiveness, he's not that kind of therapist. He wanted me to examine the layers. Why did it hurt so much? What was I afraid of? What kind of man, what kind of father, did I want to be, now that the nuclear family fantasy was shattered? I didn't have answers. I still don't. But one question stuck, what do I want Caleb and Mason to remember about this? Because one day, they're going to ask. They'll piece it together. Maybe they'll overhear something. Maybe some idiot at school will say Naomi's not their real sister. Maybe they'll find old court papers or stumble across a bitter text thread. And they'll look to me. What I say then, will shape everything. I want them to love Naomi. I want them to defend her. But how do I ask that of them, when I haven't figured out how to love her the way a father should? When I haven't figured out how to look Emily in the eyes for longer than 10 seconds? We're still under the same roof. The house feels like a museum of broken dreams. We schedule our lives like coworkers on opposite shifts. I make breakfast, she does dinner. I handle bath time, she handles bedtime stories. Weekends are a delicate game of who leaves with the kids first. And through it all, Naomi cries. Naomi feeds. Naomi grows. She's teething now. She likes when I hum to her. Sometimes she laughs when I make a silly face. And every time she smiles, it breaks me in half. Because I know that someday, she might ask me a question even harder than the one Caleb asked. Why don't I look like my brothers? And worse, are you my daddy too? I don't know how I'll answer. Not yet. But I do know this, I will never let Caleb or Mason hate her. I will never let them blame her for what their mother did. I don't care if it costs me friends, neighbors, or family. Because this girl, this sweet, brown-skinned, midnight-eyed girl, may have been born from betrayal. But she deserves love. She deserves protection. And even if I can't give her the title of daughter, I can give her that. They say grief comes in stages. Denial. Anger. Bargaining. Depression. Acceptance. But living with the person who caused the grief? That doesn't fit neatly into any 5-stage model. It's like trying to mourn the dead while they're still sitting across from you at the dinner table, cutting chicken nuggets for your 2-year-old. Our house sits on a cul-de-sac, 2 stories, beige siding, 4 bedrooms. A swing set out back, chalk drawings on the driveway. From the outside, it looks like the American dream. Inside? It feels like a funeral parlor. Quiet. Cold. Memorabilia of a life that doesn't exist anymore. The baby monitor hums on the kitchen counter next to Emily's laptop. Naomi's soft breathing pulses through it, an invisible tether binding us all. On the fridge, Caleb's latest crayon masterpiece is taped up beside a magnet that reads, "Happy wife, happy life." I should have thrown that magnet out weeks ago. But I leave it there. Maybe because I want to remind myself how blind I was. Emily and I speak only when necessary now, scheduling, groceries, school pickups. Her voice used to be music to me. I'd know her laugh in a crowd. Now it's nails on glass. Every word sounds rehearsed, as if she's in a deposition. Sometimes I catch her staring at Naomi with this mixture of awe and guilt, like she's trying to balance her love for the child with the wreckage she caused by bringing her into the world. She's not cold. I'll give her that. She still sings lullabies. Still kisses Naomi's toes and presses her close during feedings. But I wonder if she flinches like I do, if Naomi's face reminds her of him. Jordan. She said it only happened a handful of times. That it ended long before she found out she was pregnant. That he doesn't know. She never even told him. I thought about contacting him myself, to blow up his life like he blew up mine, but what would it solve? What would I even say? Congratulations. You have a daughter you'll never meet. Or worse, what if he wanted to be part of her life? What if he showed up one day, charming, composed, more together than I am, and Naomi reached for him like she never reached for me? No. I couldn't bear that. So the secret stays. Between us and the walls. A ticking time bomb disguised as a lullaby. People keep asking when we're moving out. When we'll finalize everything. My lawyer told me to play it cool until the finances are clear, until the housing market settles or we can get approved for a refinance. But the truth is more complicated. We can't afford to split. Not yet. Daycare is expensive. Formula prices are insane. Groceries? Gas? Utilities? We were barely making it on 2 incomes before. Now with Naomi in the mix, and Emily only working part-time from home, our expenses are bleeding us dry. I could move out, sure. But what kind of father would I be if I left Caleb and Mason in this mess? If I left Naomi, innocent Naomi, in the hands of a woman barely holding it together? So I stay. For the boys. For the baby. For a family that's already fractured but still functioning, like a car with 3 wheels. Last Sunday, my brother invited us over for a cookout. We used to do that every other weekend, back when things were normal. Burgers on the grill, kids running through sprinklers, beer in red Solo cups, and laughter around the fire pit. But this time felt different. We pulled up in the minivan, the same vehicle that once shuttled us to family vacations, and I swear, every head turned. Naomi was strapped to Emily's chest in a baby carrier, her tiny arms poking out like soft brown branches. Caleb held my hand. Mason sprinted toward the trampoline. "Hey," my brother said, awkwardly. "She's cute. Real cute." His wife didn't say anything. Just offered a brittle smile and busied herself with napkins. Later, I overheard my cousin whispering in the kitchen. "It's just so obvious." "What are they even telling the kids?" another voice replied. I took a long sip of beer and went outside. I don't care that Naomi's black. Let me say that again, because people keep missing it. I don't care. What I care about is how the world is reacting, how my kids are already being taught what to notice and what to fear. Caleb is 4 and already someone's asked him, "Why does your sister look like that?" And he didn't know how to answer. How could he? I haven't told him the truth yet. I still don't know how. I worry about confusing him, about planting seeds he isn't ready for. But maybe the world isn't going to wait for him to be ready. Maybe I don't have that luxury. The worst conversation I've had so far was with my dad. He called me on a Thursday. Said he was worried. Said he'd heard some things from his church group. "I just think you're making a mistake, son," he said. "How so?" "Well, you're playing dad to someone else's child." That's admirable, I guess, but what? But what kind of message does that send to your boys?" I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. "What kind of message does it send if I abandon her?" I said. "If I treat her like she's disposable because of how she looks? She's not your blood. She's their sister." He sighed. "You always were too soft." I hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the basement guest room, staring at the ceiling fan, thinking about blood. We assign it so much meaning. As if DNA is the highest form of loyalty. But I've known fathers who share blood with their children and still treat them like strangers. I've known stepdads who take a bullet for kids they didn't create. Blood is biology. Love is a choice. And even though I haven't figured out how to love Naomi the way a real father should, I haven't turned away either. Maybe that counts for something. Sometimes, late at night, I imagine a future version of me, older, calmer, talking to Naomi in a quiet kitchen while the world sleeps. Maybe she's 12. Maybe she's 15. Maybe she's crying because someone called her a name at school. Maybe she finally found out what happened. In that version, I don't stumble. I don't flinch. I just sit beside her and say, "You didn't break this family. You didn't ask for this. But you belong. I promise, you belong. God help me. I want to be that man." There are moments now where I forget. For just a breath or two, life feels normal. Like when Mason laughs at some silly cartoon and throws popcorn at the TV. Or when Caleb insists I carry him on my shoulders during walks through the park. Or when Naomi falls asleep against Emily's chest, her fingers curled into fists like she's still fighting the world in her dreams. In those moments, I forget what happened. I forget the resentment burning in my stomach like battery acid. I forget the shame, the cold stares from neighbors, the growing rift between who we used to be and who we are now. But the forgetting never lasts. All it takes is a glance at Naomi's crib. Or Emily's phone lighting up with a notification. Or the quiet in our bedroom, the silence that used to be filled with whispered jokes and slow Sunday mornings. Now, it's just walls and shadows. I started taking the boys to the playground more often. It wasn't some conscious choice, just something to get us out of the house, something that felt like routine, like motion. At first, I'd push them on the swings while zoning out completely. Lost in thought. Numb. But then something shifted. One afternoon, I noticed Mason helping a smaller kid off the ground after he fell from the slide. No prompting. No hesitation. Just this quiet, instinctual kindness. And it cracked something open in me. My boys are good kids. Empathetic. Gentle. They don't scream or hit or steal toys, they've been raised on, please, and, thank you, and I'll be damned if that falls apart now. I want them to stay that way. I want them to grow up believing that family is more than just bloodlines and last names. That responsibility doesn't vanish just because something gets hard. That skin color has nothing to do with love. But how do I teach them that when I still haven't figured out how to live it? The first and only time I broke down in front of Emily was about 2 weeks after Naomi was born. She was asleep on the couch, or pretending to be, and I'd just come back from a night walk. I sat at the kitchen table, lights off, drinking something stronger than coffee. The baby monitor crackled on the counter. And I just lost it. Not a loud breakdown. Not the kind you see in movies with fists pounding on walls. Just this quiet, suffocating unraveling. Tears slipping down my face like sweat. A sob stuck in my throat that never quite came out. My hands trembled so bad I knocked over the glass. Emily must have heard it. She came into the kitchen in her robe, holding Naomi. Her voice was soft, uncertain. "Are you okay?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the floor. She sat across from me. Naomi slept in her arms, unaware that the two people meant to raise her could barely speak to each other without choking on regret. Emily whispered, "I wish I could take it back." I looked up at her for the first time in what felt like weeks. "Why him?" I asked. My voice sounded hollow. She didn't answer at first. She just stared down at Naomi like the answer might be there. "I was lonely," she finally said. "And he saw me. Not as a mom. Not as someone's wife. Just me." I wanted to scream. I wanted to say I saw you too. Every night. Every morning. Every damn second. But the words didn't come. Maybe because deep down, I wasn't sure that was true anymore. Maybe I had stopped seeing her the way I used to. And maybe she had stopped seeing me too. Last weekend, my older sister Marissa came to visit from Chicago. She's the only person in my family who hasn't pushed me to move on or get over it. She's fierce, always has been, and when she found out about the affair, she called Emily a walking cautionary tale with an Instagram filter. But she showed up with groceries and hugs and zero judgment. We sat on the porch while the kids played in the front yard. Naomi slept inside with Emily, who kept her distance. That was probably best. Marissa was still running on very little forgiveness. "I have to ask," she said, sipping iced tea. "Why are you still here?" I rubbed my temples. "Because I can't afford not to be. And because the boys need both of us right now." "And Naomi?" I hesitated. "She's a baby. She didn't do anything wrong." "That's not what I asked." I knew what she meant. What am I to her? A stepdad? A placeholder? A man who changes diapers but avoids eye contact? "She's my responsibility," I finally said. Marissa raised an eyebrow. "You don't sound sure." "I'm trying." She looked at me then, really looked at me. The way older sisters do when they see right through your carefully stacked excuses. "Trying is good," she said. "But don't stay so long in this limbo that you forget who you are. What if I don't know anymore?" Marissa reached out and squeezed my hand. "Then figure it out. Because your kids are watching." That night, after the kids were in bed and the house went quiet, I found myself standing in Naomi's doorway. She was awake. Wide-eyed. Just staring at the ceiling like she was decoding the universe. I walked in, slow, unsure. She turned her head and looked at me. Really looked. Not with judgment. Not with confusion. Just trust. That's what gutted me the most. This tiny person who had every reason to be a symbol of loss and betrayal was staring at me like I was safe. Like I was hers. I picked her up. Held her close. She smelled like powder and milk and something else, something fragile and sweet and utterly undeserved. And for the first time since the hospital, I rocked her to sleep. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. There's no redemption arc here. Not yet. Maybe never. Emily and I still live like strangers. I still think about divorce every day. And when I look at her, I still see the lie before the love. But that night, in the quiet with Naomi pressed against my chest, I realized something. Even if I don't know what I am to her, she knows what I am right now. I am the arms that hold her when she cries. I am the heartbeat she falls asleep against. I am present. And for now, that will have to be enough. You can only bury something for so long before it starts to seep through the walls. That's what our house feels like lately, not just split in two, but seeping. With resentment. With unsaid things. With the weight of too many sleepless nights and whispered conversations behind closed doors. Even the boys can feel it. Caleb started stuttering again. Mason clings to me like he's afraid I'll vanish. And maybe I'm afraid of that too. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing special. The kind of day that passes like background noise. Emily was pacing the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, arguing with someone about rescheduling a pediatric appointment. Naomi was fussy. Mason had spilled applesauce all over the rug. Caleb had drawn something on the wall in crayon, a jagged shape that I think was meant to be our house. But it didn't look like our house. It looked like it was split in half. I want to move out, Emily said suddenly that night. The words dropped like a knife between us. We were in the living room. Naomi was asleep upstairs, the boys watching a cartoon with the volume too low to hear. I didn't respond right away. Just stared at her like she'd spoken in a foreign language. Say something, she said. I thought we couldn't afford it. I'll figure something out. Where would you even go? I don't know yet. I leaned back on the couch, heart pounding. This should have been good news. It's what I said I wanted, wasn't it? Separation. Space. Breathing room. But all I could think about was Caleb asking me that morning why Mommy cried in the bathroom. I looked at her then, really looked at her. Her hair pulled up, a loose thread unraveling from her sleeve. Tired eyes. She looked older. Smaller. She'd lost weight. Not enough to be alarming, but enough to notice. Are you okay? I asked. She laughed. But not the kind of laugh I remembered. It was hollow. Defensive. No, Mark. I'm not okay. I gave birth to a child that's not yours, and I live every day with a man who looks at me like I'm radioactive. I flinched. She wasn't wrong. I had perfected that look. But you are still here, I said. Why? She was quiet for a long time. I guess, because leaving makes it real. It already was real. Had been since the day Naomi opened her eyes and looked up at us like she knew she'd just shattered something we didn't know how to fix. We talked for hours. No yelling. No accusations. Just pain. Spread out like a jigsaw puzzle between us. We each picked up pieces, one at a time. I miss who we were, she said. So do I. Do you hate me? I don't know. Do you love her? That one stopped me cold. I thought about Naomi, her tiny fingers grabbing mine, the way she smiled with her whole face, the way she cried whenever Emily left the room but calmed the second I hummed a song I didn't even realize I'd memorized. I don't know, I said. But I'm trying. She nodded. And for a moment, I saw her shoulders fall. A small crack in the armor. I don't expect you to forgive me, she whispered. But if you can't. I need to go. We didn't resolve anything that night. But something shifted. And for the first time in weeks. I didn't sleep in the basement. I stayed on the couch. Naomi woke up at 3:12 a.m., and I fed her while Emily slept. Her little hands grasped the bottle like it was treasure. She looked at me the whole time. Like she knew I needed her to. A few days later, something happened that still echoes in my head. It was a Saturday. We took the kids to the farmer's market. Emily stayed behind, said she needed a break. I loaded Naomi into the stroller and walked the aisles with Caleb and Mason at my sides. We bought apples. The boys tried samples of local honey. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Until an older woman stopped beside us. She smiled at Naomi. She's precious, she said. Thank you. She yours? I hesitated. She's part of our family. She blinked, confused, looked at Caleb and Mason, then back at Naomi. Oh, she said. Just, oh. And walked away. Caleb tugged at my hand. What did she mean? Nothing, I said. Some people just don't understand. But she's our baby. I nodded. That's right. She's brown. But we love her. And then he ran ahead to the apple stand. I couldn't move for a few seconds. Because Caleb, my boy who still can't tie his shoes, had said in one breath the thing I'd been trying to carve into my soul since the day this all started. She's brown. But we love her. That night, I stood in the doorway of their shared bedroom. The boys were fast asleep, blankets twisted around them like seaweed. Naomi was in her bassinet nearby, arms raised above her head, dreaming of God knows what. And for the first time, I didn't see betrayal. I didn't see chaos or loss or fear. I saw my family. Not the one I wanted. But the one I had. And in that moment, for just a heartbeat, it was enough. Emily hasn't moved out yet. We're still figuring that out, still living in the gray area between forgiveness and letting go. Some days we get along. Other days we barely speak. But the kids laugh again. Naomi sleeps better. And I feel something returning. Not love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But clarity. Purpose. A sense that even if this house was built on something broken, there's still something worth saving inside. There's a strange kind of grief that comes not from loss, but from the absence of clarity. I never lost my kids. They're right here, Mason scribbling on the hardwood with dry erase markers he swears are washable, Caleb reciting the names of every dinosaur he knows like it's his life's purpose. But when I look at Naomi, I don't know what to call myself. Not out loud. Not yet. I feed her. Rock her. Sing to her. I even change the messy diapers Emily conveniently forgets when she's exhausted. But in my mind, the title hovers, that word, father, like a name I'm afraid to answer to. Because part of me still thinks I'm stealing it. Mason was the first to call Naomi his baby. It happened one morning while I was buttering toast. Naomi was fussing in her bouncer, and Emily was upstairs. Mason stood on his tiptoes, trying to rock her with his chubby hands. Shoo, he whispered. It's okay, baby. I'm your big brother. Then he looked at me, proud and certain. She's ours. 2 words. Simple. But they hit like thunder. She's ours. Not mine. Not hers. Ours. It wasn't some declaration. It wasn't meant to heal anything. It was just his truth, unfiltered by the layers adults build up over time. No moral calculus. No bitter backstory. Just love. I bent down, kissed his head, and whispered, yeah, buddy. She is. But saying it and believing it were 2 different things. I'd begun having this recurring dream. In it, Naomi's older, maybe 6 or 7, and she's holding my hand at a school event. Someone asks, is that your daddy? She looks up at me, confused. Then she lets go. And walks away. I always wake up then. Drenched in sweat, heart hammering like I've run miles. I'll sit there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the echo of those imagined footsteps still ringing in my ears. I'm not scared of the question. I'm scared of my answer. One day, I asked Grant, my therapist, what makes someone a father. He sat back in his chair, silent for a while. Then he said something I haven't stopped thinking about since. Being a father, he said, isn't about origin. It's about presence. It's about showing up, again and again, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. I told him I wasn't sure I was capable of that. He nodded. Most fathers aren't, not at first. But the ones who try anyway? They're the ones that matter. I drove home that day and stared at Naomi sleeping in her car seat for a full 5 minutes before taking her inside. She stirred in her sleep, then smiled. Like she knew I needed it. Later that week, Emily asked if I'd ever consider legally adopting Naomi. The question didn't come out of nowhere. I think she'd been carrying it like a weight for weeks, maybe even since the hospital. We were sitting outside after putting the kids to bed. It was one of those rare Indiana evenings where the humidity gives you a break and the stars actually show up. She doesn't have anyone else, she said quietly. And I know it's a lot to ask. I didn't answer. Not because I hadn't thought about it. But because I had, more than I'd like to admit. Adopting Naomi would be permanent. Binding. A declaration to the world that I was hers and she was mine, no footnotes, no explanations. It would mean surrendering to something I hadn't asked for. Something I never thought I'd want. But wasn't that fatherhood too? Raising your hand for a job no one fully understands? I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no either. Emily seemed to understand. She just nodded and went inside. I stayed out there for a long time. Just breathing. A week later, something happened that forced the issue in ways I didn't expect. I had taken all 3 kids to the park. Emily had a remote work meeting, and I needed the escape. The park was nearly empty, a blessing on any Saturday morning. Mason and Caleb raced to the sandbox while I wheeled Naomi over to the shaded bench and settled in. A few minutes later, another dad showed up. African American, mid-30s, dressed in jeans and a Nike hoodie. He had a toddler in tow and gave me the polite half-nod that standard dad code for, "I see you, man." We ended up talking. His name was Eric. Divorced, 2 kids. Moved to the suburbs last year. We laughed about the hell that is toddler sleep regression and traded notes on the best pediatricians who didn't have month-long waitlists. Then he glanced over at Naomi, who was babbling in her stroller. "She yours?" he asked. I hesitated. Then, for the first time, I said it. "Yeah. That's my daughter." He smiled. "Beautiful kid." I nodded. "Yeah. She really is." We talked a while longer, and when he left, I sat there stunned. Not because I'd said it. But because it hadn't hurt. That night, I tucked Naomi into her crib. She was just beginning to teeth, so she gnawed on a silicone ring like it was made of gold. She looked at me with those wide, liquid eyes and let out a soft coo. "Hey there, sweetheart," I said. And it hit me, I didn't feel like I was pretending anymore. I bent down, kissed her forehead, and whispered something I hadn't even planned to say. "Good night, baby girl." She giggled. And for the first time, I believed it. Emily watched me from the hallway. She didn't say anything. Just stood there with her arms crossed, an unreadable expression on her face. Later, after the kids were asleep, she came into the living room, sat on the far end of the couch. "You're doing more than I ever could have asked," she said. "And more than I deserve." I didn't respond. Because she was right. This wasn't about what she deserved. This was about what Naomi needed. And what I needed, too, even if I hadn't known it until now. Some nights, I still wake up with a pit in my stomach. Still wonder what this will look like in 5 years, in 10. Still question whether the decisions I'm making now are the right ones, or just the least painful. But I also know this. Naomi is not the symbol of our destruction. She's not the wreckage. She's the only thing left growing in the ashes. And maybe, just maybe, I was meant to grow alongside her. The first time I called Naomi my daughter in front of someone who mattered, it didn't go well. It was at my mom's house. A lazy Sunday. She wanted to have us over, just a quick family lunch, she'd said. I think she hoped a casserole and some banana bread might paper over the cracks in our lives. She still hadn't really acknowledged the situation since Naomi was born. When she visited the hospital a month after, she held Naomi like she was made of glass. Said she was sweet, but never asked questions. And now here we were, all crammed around her dining table. Caleb was crushing crackers into his soup, Mason kept asking if he could have ice cream before the actual meal, and Naomi was gurgling on my lap, tugging at my sleeve like she was trying to remind me she was here. Mom was serving salad when she finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. So, is there a plan yet? For living arrangements? Emily tensed. I cleared my throat. We're figuring it out, I said. Trying to make the transition as easy on the kids as possible. She nodded, then gave me a look. And Naomi? She asked. I blinked. What about her? Well, she set the salad bowl down. Is she going to be part of things? Emily opened her mouth, but I cut in. She's part of things, I said. She's part of us. There was silence. The kind that soaks into the walls. I just meant legally, Mom added quickly. She's not yours, biologically, so. She's my daughter, I said again, firmer this time. End of discussion. Caleb looked up from his soup, eyes wide. Mason froze mid-bite. Naomi didn't understand any of it. She was too busy trying to shove a spoon into her mouth. Mom didn't say anything for the rest of the meal. Later, as we packed the car, Emily pulled me aside. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. Yes, I did. She's your mother. And Naomi's my daughter. Emily stared at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in her face that wasn't guilt or regret. It was respect. Maybe too little, too late. But still. The ride home was quiet. Naomi slept. The boys argued over who got to hold the tablet. I just drove, my hands tight on the wheel, heart hammering. Because I'd crossed a line that day, not in a bad way, but in a permanent one. I'd taken ownership of something I didn't create. Not out of obligation. Not out of pity. But out of something deeper. Something quieter. Something stronger than blood. Choice. I had chosen her. Grant once told me that the hardest thing about being betrayed isn't the pain, it's the disorientation. You don't know who you are anymore, he said. Your role. Your story. Your place in the script. And he was right. For months, I'd been walking through this story like a man reciting lines from a play I didn't audition for. Father, husband, betrayed man, co-parent, provider, failure. A rotating cast of masks. But that night, when I put Naomi to bed, I didn't feel like I was wearing a mask anymore. I felt real. I picked her up, rocked her gently. She was wearing a yellow onesie with tiny bees on it, a gift from Emily's cousin, one of the few people who hadn't asked inappropriate questions. She looked up at me with sleepy eyes and grabbed my thumb. Daddy, she mumbled. I froze. She'd been babbling sounds for weeks now, but this was clear. Intentional. My throat tightened. I didn't know if she meant me. If she even understood what the word meant yet. But in that moment, I didn't care. Yeah, baby girl, I whispered. I'm here. The next day, my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. She left a long message. Apologized, sort of. Said she didn't mean anything by it. Said she was just trying to be realistic. But realism has limits. Realism doesn't explain the quiet ways we push people away. The subtle glances. The carefully phrased comments. The little walls we build that children feel long before they can name. I texted her 2 words. Be better. That was all. She hasn't replied. That same week, something else shifted. Emily brought up something unexpected, selling the house. I think I'm ready, she said. To figure out the next step. On my own. There wasn't bitterness in her voice. Just exhaustion. And maybe, freedom. It didn't surprise me. We'd been spinning in place for too long. Sharing walls, trading responsibilities, pretending it wasn't tearing us up from the inside out. I nodded. Yeah, I said. I think I'm ready too. We made a plan. Slow. Thoughtful. A 3-month timeline. Find her a place first. Keep the kids close. Keep things steady. And somewhere in that conversation, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of her leaving. Not of being a single dad to 2 boys and a girl who wasn't mine by blood. Because the truth was, she was mine. Not in paperwork. Not in name. But in the way she looked for me when she cried. In the way she quieted when I sang. In the way she smiled when I walked into the room. You can't fake that. You can't buy it. You can only earn it. And maybe I finally had. I don't know what's coming next. Divorce. Co-parenting schedules. Late nights pacing the floor with a baby who still has nightmares. Parent-teacher conferences where I'll have to explain that yes, she's my daughter. No, I'm not her biological father. Yes, it's complicated. But I'm not afraid of that anymore. Because complicated doesn't mean broken. And love doesn't have to look like anyone else's version. It just has to be real. And this? This is real. It started with cardboard boxes. I'd ordered them online, a moving kit, 10 flat-packed boxes, packing tape, and Sharpies. They sat unopened in the corner of the living room for 3 days before either of us touched them. It wasn't because we were too busy. It was because breaking down a home doesn't feel like a task. It feels like a funeral. The first thing I packed was our wedding photo. Not because I wanted to, but because it hurt too much to leave it on the mantel. Caleb had asked about it the day before. Is that you and Mommy? Yeah, Bud. You look happy. We were. He studied it for a long time. Why don't you look at each other like that anymore? There it was. No hesitation. No warning. Just the quiet, curious dissection of a 4-year-old boy who saw far more than I'd given him credit for. I knelt down beside him, searching for the right words. Sometimes, I said, people love each other and still end up hurting each other. And when that happens, it can be hard to get back what they had before. He didn't speak for a moment. Are you gonna stop loving Mommy? That's when the real ache hit. No, I said gently. I'll always care about her. But it's different now. And Naomi? I looked into his big brown eyes, the same eyes that widened the day Naomi came home from the hospital, the same eyes that had once asked, why is her skin chocolate? What about Naomi? I asked. She gets to stay too, right? I pulled him into my arms. She's not going anywhere. Neither are you. His little body melted against mine. For now, that was enough. That night, I found myself standing in Naomi's room again, the room that had once been our guest room, then a nursery, then a silent war zone. Emily was already asleep. I could hear her breathing from down the hall, soft and slow. Exhausted. Naomi stirred in her crib, whining in her sleep. I picked her up, instinctually, without thinking. She nestled into my chest like it was her favorite pillow. I sat in the rocking chair, the same one we'd picked out online together in happier days, and gently rocked her. And then, without meaning to, I started talking. You won't remember this, I whispered, but we lived in a house with blue shutters. Your brothers used to draw on the driveway with chalk. Your mom always burned the pancakes. She gurgled, not quite awake. I used to be so angry, Naomi. Angry at her. At myself. At the world. But not at you. Never at you. She shifted in my arms, settled again. I didn't choose how you got here. But I choose you now. Every day.